A few weeks ago, I came across a video of a traveler on a train somewhere between Beijing and Shanghai. He did something that's become a bit of a cliche, but it still feels like a minor miracle. He took a thin coin and stood it on its edge on the windowsill. The train was carving through the landscape at 350 kilometers per hour, a silver streak against the green fields, yet that coin didn't even flinch. It remained perfectly vertical, a tiny defiant monument to stability amidst a blur of extreme velocity. To the traveler, it was just a bit of fun for social media. But looking closer, that coin represents something much heavier. The physical certainty of a state that has mastered the art of building things. Now, shift that scene to a major rail hub in London or California. The atmosphere there is entirely different. It's not a place of quiet physics, but of collective frustration. You see crowds huddled under departure boards, their faces washed in the red glow of canceled or indefinite delay notices. When you ask why the tracks aren't built or the trains aren't running, you don't get an engineering problem. You get a stack of legal papers. You hear about environmental impact studies that take a decade, budget vetoes, and the endless bickering of local committees. It's a world governed by vitocracy, a system so caught up in procedural fairness that has lost the capacity to actually move. In 2026, this gap is about to become a chasm. With the commercial launch of the CR450 pushing land speeds to 450 kilometers per hour, we are entering an era where velocity isn't just a metric, it's a civilizational audit. While one system is trapped in a loop of litigation and financial engineering, the other is rewriting the very substrate of modern existence. It's a clash between the culture of the lawyer and the culture of the engineer, and the results are being written in steel at a speed most of us can barely comprehend. It feels like we're standing right on the edge of something massive.
It's such a powerful image. It completely breaks your intuition of what speed should feel like. Usually you think speed, you think vibration, you think chaos. But that coin just standing there, perfectly still, that's control. That's mastery over the physical world.
Exactly. And that is where I really want to start today.
Yeah.
Because to the traveler, sure, it's a cool video for social media. But if you peel back the layers, that coin represents something much, much heavier. It represents a concept that just kept popping up in the research for this deep dive: physical certainty.
Physical certainty. It's a term we're going to be coming back to a lot today, I think.
And frankly, when I look at that coin, and then I look at the state of infrastructure closer to home, you know, a rail hub in London or that proposed high-speed line in California, the contrast is just, it's painful. In those places, the atmosphere isn't quiet physics. It's collective frustration. You see the crowds staring at the departure boards and everything is delayed, everything is over budget. And when you ask why aren't the tracks built? Why aren't the trains running on time? You don't get an engineering answer.
No, you definitely don't. You get a legal answer.
Or a political one.
You get a stack of paperwork. You hear about environmental impact studies that take a decade to complete.
A decade.
Budget vetoes, the endless bickering of local committees. It's this world governed by vitocracy, a system so caught up in, procedural fairness that it has lost the capacity to actually move.
It's paralyzed by its own process.
And here's the kicker, and really the reason we're doing this show today. In 2026, this gap is about to become a chasm. With the commercial launch of the CR450 pushing land speeds to 450 kilometers per hour, we're entering an era where velocity isn't just a metric anymore. It's the text called it a civilizational audit. That phrasing, civilizational audit, is really the crux of our investigation today. Because when we look at the stack of documents we have, and we've got technical breakdowns of the CR450, we have the blueprints of the 15th five-year plan, and analysis of this physical internet, we're not just looking at a tech review. We're looking at a test of state capacity.
State capacity.
Yeah.
Let's pause there for a second, because that's a term that gets thrown around in political science classes.
Yeah.
What does it actually mean in the context of our deep dive today? To me, it sounds a little bit abstract.
It sounds abstract, but it's probably the most tangible thing in your life. State capacity is simply the ability of a government to get things done.
Okay.
Can you move atoms? Can you move people, goods, raw materials, energy from point A to point B reliably and quickly? In the 20th century, maybe we judged a society by its philosophy, its art, its stock market performance. But today, in a world of, fractured supply chains and global instability, the primary metric of a functional society is, does the stuff get where it needs to go?
So if I can't get a face mask during a pandemic, or I can't get a microchip for my new car, or I just can't get a train into the city center without 3 delays, that's a failure of state capacity.
It is the ability to project your will into the physical world. And the material we're looking at today suggests that one specific model of governance is proving it can move those atoms much, much faster than the model we're used to in the West.
This is going to be a fascinating, and I think for some of our listeners, maybe a challenging discussion. We're going to explore three massive pillars today. First, this idea of the physical internet, this mind-bending concept of a friction-free logistical web.
Right.
Second, the machine itself, the CR450 train, and the specific technologies that make it possible. And third, the governance model that allows for what's called intergenerational commitment. I mean, how do you plan a project that takes 20 years when your political cycle changes every 4? And before we dive into the specs, I want to set the mood a bit more. I was digging into some of the footnotes of the 15th five-year plan documents, and I found a perspective that really grounded this for me. We talk a lot about democracy and process in the West, and those things are valuable, but there's this visceral human side to what happens when a society prioritizes physical certainty over bureaucratic vetting. It's almost seductive.
It changes the psychology of the people living within it. When the train arrives exactly when it says it will, every single time, for a decade, that has to do something to your worldview.
It has to. But we're not just talking about trains today, we're talking about the architecture of the future.
The plan.
The 15th five-year plan. This covers 2026 to 2030. Now, to a Western ear, the phrase five-year plan sounds like a relic. It sounds like something out of a Cold War history class.
A bit dusty, yeah.
But the documents we've seen paint a picture of something that is very much alive and incredibly sophisticated. To understand how this feels on the ground, I want you to picture a specific person. I was reading a profile of an urban planner in a coastal province, Chen.
Okay, so lay the scene for us. Who is Chen?
Imagine standing in his office. It's floor-to-ceiling glass, and it's overlooking a district that 15 years ago was just farmland. Chen has spent 20 years of his career watching the same high-speed rail corridor evolve. For him, the launch of the CR450, this 450-kilometer beast, isn't just a faster commute. It's the realization of what he calls intergenerational commitment. He remembers his father, who was also an engineer, sitting at a drafting table decades ago, drawing the early routes for the first generation 250-kilometer-hour lines.
Wow, so he's literally seeing his father's work being completed and then take to the next level.
In his world, the 15th five-year plan isn't a political campaign promise. It's not something a candidate says to get elected and then, forgets about in November. It's like a relay race where the baton is never, ever dropped. He mentioned that when he watches the CR450 streak pass his window, he doesn't just see a machine, he sees a technocratic pulse.
Technocratic pulse.
He says he feels this profound sense of psychological security. And why? Because he knows that the future of the next decade is already physically locked in. He knows the budget for the expansion that's planned for 2028 is already allocated. It's not up for debate.
It's a known variable. It's not a question mark.
And to him, when he looks at the West, at what he calls our vitocracy, where a single local lawsuit can kill a decade of national progress, it looks like pure insanity. He literally views it as a form of civilizational self-harm.
That's a harsh assessment, but from his perspective, you can see why he'd think that. If your primary metric for a successful society is building things, then a system that allows anyone and everyone to stop you from building is, by definition, broken.
And honestly, reading his account, I was just struck by the cold efficiency of it. As someone living in a culture where we debate a new bike lane for 3 years.
Or a new airport runway for 30.
Exactly. The idea of a decisive advantage through long-term uninterrupted planning is incredibly appealing. There's a peace of mind that comes from knowing the future has been decided by, the smartest people in the room, and that your life's work won't be undone just because the administration changes.
That continuity is the secret sauce of the five-year plan structure. Think about the rhythm of Western politics. It's a 4-year cycle. It's a sine wave.
Up and down.
One party builds, the next party halts, or they pivot to something else entirely. The 15th five-year plan, or 15 to 5, operates on a continuous horizon. They're not just planning for 2030. The 15th plan is just the next 5-year chunk of a 30-year vision.
So if you're Chen, the urban planner, you aren't worried about the midterm elections.
No, you're worried about the engineering challenges, the material science, the logistics, not the political ones. And what's crucial about the 15 to 5, according to the documents, is the specific focus. It's not just about growth or GDP anymore.
Right.
The central theme is this phrase: New quality productive forces.
Okay, new quality productive forces.
Yeah.
That sounds like textbook jargon. What are they actually targeting with that?
At its core, it's about industrial resilience. The plan explicitly mandates that the real economy cannot be lost. This is a direct critique of Western deindustrialization. They're looking at the West, seeing economies based on finance, on services, on social media apps, and they're saying, no, that is fragile. We need to actually make things.
So it's a complete rejection of the idea that you can just be a service economy and let someone else handle manufacturing.
The plan targets very specific frontiers. Green technologies, advanced semiconductors, and crucially for our discussion, the nationwide integration of AI-driven logistics grids. They are betting the house on the idea that the physical capability to produce and move goods is the only real wealth in a chaotic world.
It really puts the engineer at the top of the social hierarchy, doesn't it? The person who can build something tangible.
It creates an environment where engineers can plan for decades, not just fiscal quarters. If you know the state is committed to new quality productive forces for the next 20 years, you can invest in the long-term R&D for a train like the CR450 without worrying that the market won't support it in year 2.
The state basically acts as the guarantor of the future, which brings us to the machine itself. We've established the planning philosophy, this relentless, multi-generational march forward. But now we need to look at the tangible result of that philosophy, the CR450.
The steel and carbon fiber manifestation of the plan.
And again, to understand what this machine really means, I want to step into the shoes of someone who relies on it.
The user experience, not just the planner's dream.
I came across a fascinating account from a logistics manager based in the Greater Bay Area. Let's call her Wei. She deals with what we're calling the physical internet every single day. And for her, the transition to 450-kilometer rad rail and automated smart ports, it isn't just about things being fast. She describes it as the death of distance.
The death of distance.
But listen to her reasoning. She recounts a week where a global shipping crisis stalled Western ports for months. We all remember those photos, right? The ships just queued up off the coast of California waiting to dock.
The great supply chain crunch of the early 2020s. It was chaos.
Yes. But while that was happening, her cargo was moving through a frictionless web of smart rail and automated seaports. She called it a physical firewall against global chaos.
So it insulated her business from the global mess.
To her, the financialized models of the West, where companies seem to care more about stock buybacks than the actual speed of a loading crane, seemed like a complete hallucination. She said she feels like she lives in a functional society because when she pushes a button on her computer, a physical object moves across a continent with, and this is her phrase, mathematical certainty.
That phrase, mathematical certainty, is key. And in this case, it's a certainty defined by the number 450.
I'm a bit of a spec nerd, and I know our listeners want to know what makes this thing tick. We know it's fast. But how fast is fast in this context?
Okay, so the test speeds are consistently hitting 450 kilometers per hour. That's about 280 miles per hour. The operational speed, meaning the speed it will travel with you and me sitting in it, sipping coffee, is 400 kilometers per hour.
Just to contextualize that for everyone listening, standard high-speed rail like the TGV in France or the Shinkansen in Japan usually tops out operationally around 300, maybe 320 kilometers per hour.
Correct. The current Chinese workhorse, the CR400, does 350. So jumping from 350 to 400 operational speed and having 450 in your back pocket for testing, that is a massive leap. But here's the thing, and this is where the real insight is. It's not just about putting a bigger engine in the train.
Right, because of wind resistance. Physics is a cruel mistress at those speeds.
Drag doesn't increase linearly. It increases exponentially with speed. To go from 350 to 400 requires a radical rethink of the entire system, especially aerodynamics. The air at that speed feels like concrete. They've managed to cut aerodynamic drag by 22% compared to the previous generation, the CR400.
22%. That's a massive number in aerospace or high-speed vehicle design. How?
It's a holistic change. It's a change in the sleekness of the nose cone. It's the covering of the bogies, the wheel assemblies, and the smoothing of the pantograph, which is the arm that collects power from the overhead lines. It's about removing every millimeter of potential friction.
Yes.
But the real game changer is under the hood. They are using permanent magnet traction motors.
Okay, permanent magnet traction motors. I see this acronym, PMSM, in the tech sheets.
Yeah.
Is it just a slightly better motor?
No, it's a fundamentally better technology. Think of it like the difference between an old-school induction motor and the motor in a high-end EV, like a Tesla or a Lucid. Traditional asynchronous motors are heavy. They generate a lot of waste heat.
Right.
Permanent magnet motors use rare earth magnets to create the magnetic field. They're smaller, they're lighter, and crucially, they're about 3% more efficient.
3% sounds kind of small.
It sounds small, but when you scale that across a nationwide network running thousands of trips a day, every day of the year, it's gigawatts of power saved. Enormous.
Yeah.
And it also allows for much better torque control, instant response.
Okay, so more efficient, lighter, better control.
And that ties directly into the next stat, energy consumption.
This was the number that actually made me do a double take when I read it.
Staggering. Despite running at 400 kilometers, battling that exponential wind resistance, the energy consumption is only 22 to 23 kilowatt hours of electricity per kilometer. And that's for the entire 8-carriage train.
Wait, let me just make sure I'm getting this right. 23 kilowatt hours to move an entire train 1 kilometer. My electric car has a battery of about 75 kilowatt hours. So moving this massive train for 3 kilometers takes about the same energy as one full charge of a single car.
Well, looking at it per unit of mass or per passenger, it's unbelievably efficient. If you have, say, 1,000 people on that train, the energy cost per person to travel at 400 kilometer rate is negligible. It completely proves that extreme speed doesn't have to mean extreme waste.
And a big part of that efficiency comes from putting the train on a diet, right?
Absolutely. They reduced the overall weight by over 10% compared to the last model, and they did that by using advanced materials. We're talking carbon fiber composites, aluminum, and even magnesium alloys in the chassis and body.
Magnesium alloys. That is serious material science. Usually you see that in aerospace or Formula One, not on a railway.
And that's the entire point. This is hard engineering. You can't fake a magnesium alloy chassis. You either have the metallurgy and the manufacturing base to cast it properly, or you don't. And this brings us to the comparison the sources kept making with the West. They call it hard engineering versus financial engineering.
I have to admit, I felt a bit attacked reading that section. But Aim, it's a very valid point. The sources point to the decline of Western industrial giants. They specifically mention Boeing as the counterexample.
It's a painful, but I think a necessary comparison. The argument is that the Western model has shifted its focus toward financial engineering. This means prioritizing shareholder returns, doing stock buybacks, and using sophisticated accounting to look profitable, even if the underlying product isn't improving.
You're optimizing the spreadsheet, not the actual product coming off the assembly line.
Exactly. But you cannot financialize your way to 450 kilometers per hour. Physics doesn't care about your quarterly earnings report. You can't negotiate with drag coefficients. You either build the magnesium alloy chassis correctly, or the train vibrates apart at speed. The CR450 is tangible, physical proof of superiority in the material realm. While a financialized company is busy trying to squeeze out a 2% dividend hike, the state-backed engineers are squeezing out a 2% reduction in cabin noise.
Speaking of the cabin noise, there's a detail here about the passenger experience. This isn't just a fast metal tube.
No, they've managed to reduce noise levels by 2 decibels. Now, in acoustics, that's a very perceptible drop. It's quieter inside the CR450 at 400 kilometers than the old trains were at 300. And the interior, well, the business class seats can rotate 300 degrees.
Rotating seats, why would you need that? So you can look out the window better.
Or so you can turn to face your colleagues and have a 4-person meeting while you travel. And get this, they have airborne buttons for the restrooms.
Airborne buttons, what does that even mean?
Think holographic or proximity sensors. You just wave your hand. You don't have to touch anything. It's completely contactless.
It honestly sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. But I have to ask the skeptic's question here. We're marveling at the technology, and it is absolutely marvelous. But is this just a vanity project? Does a country really need to move people at 450 kilometers per hour? Is the difference between 350 and 400 really worth the billions in R&D?
If you look at it purely from the perspective of saving 20 minutes on a commute, then maybe not. But if you look at it as a tool for economic geography, as a way to expand the radius of a labor market, it changes everything.
What do you mean by that?
At 450 kilometers per hour, cities that are 500 kilometers apart are now within a 1-hour commute of each other. It effectively merges Beijing and Shanghai into a single economic superorganism. It's not about travel anymore. It's about agglomeration. It makes the available labor pool, the available talent, absolutely massive.
So it basically turns the entire eastern seaboard of the country into one single mega city.
Yes. And that is the ultimate goal of the physical internet.
The physical internet. This is the third pillar of our deep dive today. And honestly, this is where the sci-fi vibes really kick in for me. We've talked about the plan, we've talked about the train. But the train is just one packet moving through a much, much larger network.
Right. Physical internet, or PI. It's a concept that academics have been discussing for years, but now it's actually being built at a national scale.
And to understand the mindset here, I will bring in one last perspective. This one comes from the design floor itself. I was reading the blog posts of a young locomotive designer who works on the CR450's braking systems. And let me tell you, the attitude is it's striking. There is this quiet, almost arrogant pride in what they call engineering sovereignty.
Engineering sovereignty, the idea that if you can build it, you own the future.
He writes about how he doesn't spend his time lobbying politicians or navigating legal loopholes. He spends his time in wind tunnels and materials labs. He recently posted about how the 450 kilometer threshold is the metric of truth.
The metric of truth.
To him, speed exposes weakness in a society. If your society has a weak manufacturing base, you can't build a high-efficiency motor. If your society has a weak government, you can't clear the land for the thousands of kilometers of track.
It's a stress test for the entire system.
He believes that a society that can't build a train like this has lost its will to act. He looks at the West and sees what he calls lawyer-led stagnation, a culture of no. When he looks at the CR450, he feels he is part of a civilization that is in its prime, moving at a velocity that the aging, stagnant vitocracies simply cannot perceive, let alone match.
It's a powerful vision, and it connects directly to how they view logistics as a whole. The physical internet is defined by drawing a direct analogy to the digital internet we all use every day.
Okay, walk us through this analogy, because I know how the internet works. I type an email, it gets chopped up into data packets, they get sent through the network and reassembled at the other end.
Exactly. And when you send that email, do you care which server it goes through? Do you care if it travels through a fiber optic cable under the Atlantic or gets bounced off a satellite?
I just hit send and it arrives.
That's because of protocols like TCP/IP. The data is standardized, it's encapsulated, it's routed automatically, and it's reassembled at the destination. It's completely seamless from the user's perspective. The physical internet aims to do exactly that with atoms, with physical goods.
So it's a TCP/IP protocol for freight.
Yes. Instead of data packets, you have standardized modular containers. Instead of routers and servers, you have smart ports and automated rail hubs like the ones the CR450 will use. The goal is to move physical objects with the same automated, protocol-driven efficiency as digital data. You don't manage the shipment anymore, the network manages it for you.
And the nerve center of this entire system, according to our research, is the Yangshan port near Shanghai.
Yangshan. The stats on this place are just mind-boggling. It's built on 13 square miles of artificial islands.
Artificial islands. They just conjured them out of the sea to build a port.
And it handles 47 million containers a year.
Just to put that in perspective, that's more than all the major U.S. ports combined.
All of them combined. But the real kicker is the level of automation. It has 130 automated berths. There are 0 human operators on the docks.
This is the part that haunts me a little bit, the photos of Yangshan. It's this massive, sprawling industrial landscape with cranes moving, trucks driving themselves, containers stacking up like Lego bricks.
Yep.
And there isn't a single person in sight. It's a ghost town of pure productivity.
It's the physical internet in action. The AI calculates the most efficient unloading sequence before the ship even docks. The source notes that unloading and sorting a massive container ship at Yangshan takes, on average, about 18 hours.
And in a traditional, human-operated port,
3 to 5 days.
18 hours versus 5 days. That brings us right back to our logistics manager, Wei. That is the tangible difference between a functional society and a stagnant one.
And it leads to a strategic concept that military and economic planners are starting to talk about. Flow hegemony.
Flow hegemony.
It's a powerful strategic concept. If you can minimize logistical friction to that degree, using facilities like Yangshan and high-speed rail networks like the one the CR450 runs on, you guarantee your own supply chain resilience. But it's not just about trade, it's about dictating the terms of global commerce. If your system is 5 times faster and 10 times more reliable than anyone else's, everyone else has to route their goods through you. You become the central router of the global physical economy.
It's like being the server farm that all the internet traffic for a continent has to pass through. You control the flow.
Exactly. And in a world of increasing conflict or crisis, having control of the flow is arguably more valuable than having a standing army.
It's a compelling and slightly terrifying argument. But we keep coming back to the how. Why can they build these artificial islands and 450-kilometer train lines when, as we mentioned in the intro, a place like California or the UK struggles to build a few miles of track? Our sources point again and again to this concept of vitocracy.
Yes. This is the crucial governance distinction. The research from Why China Can Build Infrastructure Faster breaks this down brilliantly, and it really starts with something as basic as land ownership.
Right. In China, all urban land is state-owned.
Correct. And that allows for extraordinary flexibility in planning. If the state decides a high-speed rail line needs to go through a specific corridor to maximize efficiency for the nation, they can assemble that land. They can redesign entire cities or build these mega projects like the CR450 lines without getting bogged down in thousands of individual property lawsuits.
Whereas in the West,
we have very strong private property rights and a legal system designed to protect those rights, which is a good thing in many ways. But the side effect is what economists call holdout problems. One person refuses to sell their land, or one local committee files an environmental injunction, and the entire multi-billion-dollar national project can stall for years.
this is the vetocracy, the rule by veto.
Exactly. It's about fragmented authority. Think about a major project in the U.S. You have federal government agencies, state governments, and local city or county governments. You have the court system. You have environmental review boards. Any single one of those actors can say no. It creates a system where no is the default answer because getting to yes requires almost unanimous consent from dozens of competing interests.
I remember reading about a project to build a single public toilet in a park in San Francisco. It was projected to cost $1.7 million and take 2 years to build because of all the reviews and committees it had to go through. That is vetocracy in a nutshell.
That is the perfect, if slightly absurd, example. The process itself becomes more important than the product. The Eastern model essentially minimizes those veto points. Once the decision is made at the top, usually based on hard technical KPIs like we need to move X million people between Beijing and Shanghai by 2030, the execution is decisive. It's an engineer's approach to governance. You identify the problem, you design the solution, and then you implement it.
You don't ask the gravel if it wants to be turned into a road.
You don't. And there's another interesting concept from one of the Tilburg University sources that fits in perfectly here. Warehouseification and hubify.
Warehouseification. I feel like I see this everywhere now. You're driving through the countryside and suddenly there are these massive gray Amazon fulfillment centers just popping up in the middle of nowhere.
Exactly. In the West, that happens somewhat chaotically. The market demands a warehouse, a developer finds a cheap plot of land, gets it zoned, and they build it. But then you have hundreds of trucks clogging up small country roads, you have noise pollution, and the local residents hate it. It creates tremendous social friction.
NIMBism. Not in my backyard.
Right. And so you get local resistance to everything. The hubify concept is the proposed solution. It means clustering all of these logistics centers into massive, dedicated, purpose-built zones like Yangshan or specific inland rail hubs, rather than scattering them all over the landscape.
Centralizing the chaos.
The expert source notes that China's planning system allows for this clustering to happen naturally. They can designate a zone, build all the necessary infrastructure, the highways, the rail spurs, and then basically force the logistics industry to cluster there.
So they separate the industrial flow from the residential living spaces.
Western planners struggle to do this because, again, local resistance makes it almost impossible to build these mega hubs anywhere near population centers, but land prices make it hard to build them too far away. So you end up with this inefficient, friction-filled sprawl.
It seems like everything we've talked about today keeps coming back to this fundamental trade-off. In the West, we have individual rights, we have checks and balances, we have the ability to say no to the state, and that is precious. The cost is that we can't seem to build the physical internet. We get congestion, delays, and aging infrastructure.
And the other model gives up that individual right to say no, but in return, they get the CR450 and 24-hour delivery nationwide.
That is the synthesis of our discussion today, isn't it? We've moved from a world where civilization was defined perhaps by abstract rights or financial markers, stock markets, GDP per capita, to one that's going to be defined by physical certainty.
Physical certainty. Yeah. And one of the sources frames this as a kind of forensic report of history. It argues that the future will belong to functional societies.
Societies that just work.
Societies that can maintain the physical substrate of life. The sewers, the tunnels, the high-speed rail, the energy grids. The source argues that the decay of infrastructure we see in parts of the West isn't an inevitability, it's a choice. It's a choice to prioritize procedure over outcome.
And the refusal of decline, as they call it, is the opposite choice. It's the choice to prioritize outcome over procedure.
Exactly. When you look at the CR450, you aren't just looking at a really fast train. You are looking at a state that has made a conscious decision that being able to move things, people, goods, energy quickly and reliably is the most important function of government in the 21st century.
We like to think that the best system wins in the end. But maybe the best system is simply the one that can endure the physical challenges of the next century.
The one that can keep the lights on and the trains running on time.
Which brings me all the way back to that image we started with, the coin.
The coin on the windowsill.
The coin standing on the windowsill at 450 kilometers per hour isn't a magic trick. It is a monument to a specific choice. A choice to value the objective truth of the material world over the procedural debates of the abstract one. As we move into the era of the 15th five-year plan, that coin reminds us that in the final accounting, rhetoric fades, financial bubbles burst, but physical certainty endures.